Hey, everybody, and welcome to the InfernoCast episode 011 or 11. And we got a really fun topic today that really hits on all of us here in the crew's long storied history in video games, as all six of us combined have over 190 years of video game experience. And as old and as sad as that might sound, it's going to be a really, really fun topic because it sort of goes into an older history of video games. But before we get into that, just sort of want to go ahead and introduce myself and our crew here. I, of course, am Inferno Fox. I am the host of the YouTube site of Inferno Fox Gaming. And you, of course, can find this podcast here on the same YouTube site, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. And joining me today, we, of course, have Stormrosesky of the Twitch and YouTube channels of Stormrosesky. Storm, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and please be gentle.
I make no guarantees.
And a bad day.
Absolutely not.
I'll just talk about Pac-Man. Pac-Man. All right.
Next, we have Astrimedes. He is a developer and co-owner of Second Place Games. Astrimedes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And next, we have Jason the 13th of the YouTube channel Jason the 13th. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Not a problem at all.
And we have Jamie Owls 87. She is my partner and partner in crime. Jamie Owls, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
And finally, last and certainly absolutely definitely not least, we have Simbu Darkfang. He is our resident level 5 grandpa and actor at the Basement of the Dead. Simbu, thank you so much for joining us.
I would like to thank the Academy for this prestigious award. Oh, wait. Sorry, where are we again?
You are accepting the award for biggest ham.
Hey, if it's a honey ham, I'm in.
Heck yes, it is a honey ham. You got it. And just again, brief note, that again is Basement of the Dead in Aurora, Illinois. They have their opening weekend on September 22nd, 2023. So again, if you're in the Chicagoland area, please come out and check that out. It's always a really good time there. And today's topic is about our favorite third generation NES games or third generation video games in general. But before we get into that, I just want to raise a question for you guys in regards to one of the series that started in this particular generation. Have you guys had any experience with the Castlevania series?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly.
No, I've only watched the Netflix
one.
show.
No, beyond the first one.
Gotcha.
I think I played the first two.
I played, I believe, the first 3 on NES, and then maybe like 1 or so of the SNES Castlevania games.
And then Jamie Owls, is that the... Because you played the Xbox.
I played the Xbox. I'm aware of the NES versions. I believe we used to rent those from Blockbuster back in the day. But yeah, I'm more familiar with the Xbox One.
Nice. And then Storm, I think you said that you watched the anime. I don't remember.
Yeah, that was it. I've not played any Castlevania. I've only seen the Netflix anime, which I absolutely loved.
Yeah, it was.
So played Castlevania, but don't.
For being based off of the series, especially a series that its last few entries were the very mid to abysmal Lord of Shadows series, like the anime was phenomenal, a great, one of the best adaptations, which of course we talked about movies and TV shows being adapted from video games, and that's probably one of the best. The reason I mention that, of course, is that the channel on my Inferno Fox Gaming channel this Saturday, am featuring the top 10 Castlevania games because, of course, I'm a big dork and I play a whole bunch of these series, Castlevania being no exception. And I've rated and ranked the over 10 plus Castlevania games that I have played. And there have been some good ones and not so good ones. But today we're going to be talking about some really good games, our favorite in the third generation. And just kind of as a little bit of a background, there were other systems out at the same time, like the Sega Master System and the Atari 7800. But I'm going to guess all six of us are probably going to be featuring more heavily the games from the NES because we're all from the United States. The Sega Master System, while available in the US, was not near as big as it was. I think it really was big in Europe, specifically the UK, and then Brazil in like the 90s and early aughts. It was a really weird system. But so, and again, it just a reminder, this is our favorite games of this generation, not what we believe are the best. That really kind of impacts me personally because like my favorite three are not going to be what I would think would be the best three on the system. But let's go ahead and Jason the 13th, because we were kind of talking about this before we started recording here, and you kind of gave us a good perspective on some of your favorites. So go ahead and enlighten us. What are your three favorite NES games?
All right, so I have to go with thought about leaving it out, but I'm gonna say my number one favorite and one of the best in my list too is Mega Man 2. Of course, Mega Man is one of my favorite franchises of all time, so that would be number one on the list. Now, the number 2 and 3 probably not as known, but I was thinking back as to how much I replayed games when I was young. Like, I know Mario Brothers was one of those, but I wouldn't say it was my favorite game. I enjoyed, for my number 2 would be the G.I. Joe All-American Heroes. The first one, I don't recall ever playing the sequel that came out, but the first one, it was such a great game. Number 3 would be Little Nemo, the Dream Master. Oh my gosh, why is the name It's Little Nemo Dream Master, right?
Yep.
I think so.
That was another one that was extremely fun to play and just replayed it over and over and over. And then, of course, you have tons of honorable mentions. But the two we talked about earlier, two honorable mentions that I loved beyond belief was Dino Riki and the Caveman games. We played the crap out of all those games.
Oh, nice. Yeah, those are some great entries. You can't go wrong with Mega Man 2 because that's a classic.
It is probably. I mean, I remember playing the first Mega Man, but Mega Man 2 is what got me into the Mega Man fandom, basically.
And like Little Nemo, as sad as it sounds, I didn't know that was based on an anime movie until
back then. I did not either.
It was actually wasn't it originally a comic strip that ran like in the whatever 20s or 30s or something like that.
Yeah, it was originally from like 1936, and it was an American comic strip in the New Yorker, I think, for a year or something.
Sounds right. Yeah,
did not know that. I knew of the anime.
So you figure you add 58 years, the copyright limitation on top of when that originally released, and now it can become a good Japanese anime movie, and then. Frickin' Capcom with their awesome adaptations of like anything animated and not comes in and does this fantastic game for it. It's just amazing.
But Little Nemo was on my runners-up list. So.
Yeah, I was thinking of those games that you just constantly replayed. Like I was looking at the list of games online, and I was like, "Ooh, that was a good game. That was a good game." But I remember playing them, but not as much as I played those.
Yeah, and just all three of those really have that sort of probably Mega Man. All the Mega Man games have that replayability. Just the order of beating like that. That's what really made those games.
Mm-hmm.
But and then you and I had talked about which one is the best of the Mega Mans. It was between 2, 3, and Mega Man X, and the correct answer is Mega Man 2.
Yeah, Yep.
Mega Man 2 is the one I played the most. I shamefully forgot about Mega Man when I was preparing for my list, but
That's okay.
I did play a lot of Mega Man 2. I remember really liking it and playing it with my brothers and cousins and getting really scared when I think the dragon appears in like a
Oh.
jumping puzzle icy area or something. I believe there was a dragon mini boss.
Yep.
Oh gosh, that's too funny. I'm gonna touch upon and ask Jamie Owls what your top 3 games were.
So, would you allow like a very last minute change? Because I just remember a game that I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot about that.
No, sorry, no last minute. We were
We've all
locked
gone
in.
through the multi-step review process
Yeah.
that we
Okay.
always go through for this cast.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I couldn't tell if you guys were serious, but
No,
thanks.
absolutely
No.
not.
All right. Well, number one, of course, we all know Super Mario, the very first one. That one I, always played with my siblings. Super Mario 3, another one. And the third one is Duck Hunt.
Really?
Duck Hunt. And I'm kicking myself because I'm like, I know there were more games than the first original 3 I picked. And so I just quickly did a Google search and I saw Duck Hunt. And I'm like, oh my God, that was the game I played a lot. And I used to hate the dog so much. Like, I wanted to shoot the dog more than the dog.
Yeah, the game doesn't let you shoot a
No.
fire when the dog pops out of the
Nope.
screen, jerk.
Yeah, I hated him.
Didn't somebody create a emulation where it's Dog Hunt, not Duck Hunt? You're hunting the dog.
I
Oh,
think so. I think
sure.
they've done a mod like that. Good call.
Sounds familiar, yeah. Probably a ROM hack or whatever, yeah.
And Jamie Owls, you had mentioned your number 3 before to me prior to the recording
Yeah.
for California games. So
Yeah.
bumping that down to honorable mention.
Yes.
So it's funny, and I wanted to call on you next, not only to kind of get the Mario games mentioned right away, because of course those are excellent games in their own right.
Mhm.
But Jason had mentioned the Caveman games, and then
Yes.
Jimmy Owls, you had mentioned California games, and I've played neither. So I'm going to pit you both together and argue which of the 2 games are better. Jason, what made Caveman games so good to you?
Well, when I was young, I loved everything dinosaurs, so the Caveman games definitely struck my fancy more than California games. I do remember playing California games. I never owned that one. My cousin owned it, and we would play that one over there. And of course, you had to have one of the what was it called? It was the big square, almost like it was they had like the joystick with the
NES
giant EMP
Advantage?
button.
Was
Yeah.
it Advantage?
Yes, and it had the turbo, and you had to use
Yes,
turbo to
yes.
get past some of the stuff. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
But the whole dinosaur theme with the cavemans, and it was more humorous with the caveman games, is what made that one stick out to me.
Now, did Caveman games have a shark at all?
No.
So Jamie Owls, is that the kicker with California games because that has a shark in it?
Probably, because I used to remember always playing, the surfing part, and I would purposely throw the guy into the water, and you see the little shark pop its head out. I also like the roller skating part too. That was fun.
And fast forward about 25 years to you playing GTA 5 and taking the guy out in the open just to get eaten by the shark.
Yeah. I do that when I'm bored.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny.
Yeah, I played Caveman games. I think we rented it like several times. I don't think we owned it, but I remember, it being very like the art was really fun, and it was like a really like fun and full of dinosaurs game, and the gameplay was awful. It was tap the button as fast as you can,
of course,
all that kind of stuff. I played California games maybe once or twice. I don't remember. Was California games just as bad as as caveman games in terms of just being about jamming the buttons, or was it a little more interesting, skill based?
Jamie Owls, you want to take that one? Because
Maybe you don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
because
No.
I've tried it recently a couple times and it wasn't great, but I didn't play it as a kid, so I don't have the nostalgia goggles on. So
I
Was
never
it all
played.
about? Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, since you played it recently, Inferno Fox, did it seem like it was about tapping the button the fastest, or was it at least a little more complex than that? Because that's what 99% of caveman games
Yes,
boils down
Who
to.
can hit the button the quickest?
it was, for me, it was mostly about failing and failing a lot and failing often, which is what I did gloriously and horrendously. So I couldn't tell you. I literally didn't know what I needed to do in half of these
I
games.
see. I see. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like how like Mario Party games are where they give you the instructions. It's like,
Of course,
or
yeah.
you're right in the game and you just
The kids will figure it out after they play it 100 times.
and it's assuming the kids are reading the manuals beforehand. But
Assuming most kids can read at this point.
yeah, so, dude, I remember getting the manuals and everything and poring over them. Like, it wouldn't be that I had the strongest reading skills, but like the pictures and everything.
There
and
were
the art was
certain
awesome.
games that I poured over the manuals, and then other games didn't look at the manuals once.
Yes. Oh gosh. Simbu, I want to go ahead and ask you, what are three of your favorite games from this third generation?
Well, I mean, let's go ahead and even though it is probably one of the worst games ever created,
E.T.
uh,
I was thinking the same
absolutely
thing.
not. Absolutely not. The Friday the 13th game for NES.
That was
It was
fun.
my foray into horror. And obviously, as anybody who knows me sees how well that stuck. I obviously Super Mario is always a fun game to play. And then of course I got to go with Micro Machines.
Yes.
Oh,
That
Micro
was one of
Machines.
the best racing games. Yep.
Uh-huh. It was horrendous, as far as graphical and whatnot,
Well.
but it was so much fun. Again, you're a tiny little car racing on a pool table, racing across the kitchen counter, racing through the living room. I mean, it was unique and it was a lot of fun. And then I guess one of my only real honorable mention would have to be the American Gladiators game.
Ooh, I don't remember
interesting.
that one as much.
That was during the time when American Gladiators was like the Cats
Right,
behind.
yep.
yes.
So it was kind of fun to watch the show on TV and then be able to play through the challenges, yourself, which of course I didn't have an NES, so a lot of that was at friends' houses or at Jason the 13th's place where we played a lot of Micro Machines.
Yes, we did.
Yes, you did.
Because of one of the very few two-player games where we could both play together.
Yeah, it's so funny. Jimmy Owls and I were playing that together for a little bit, working on a some content for the YouTube channel, and that was something that we did some time on. We had no idea what the heck was going on and how to play it, but we were doing it. We were driving the little cars. We kept like going one end and Jamie Owls going the other, just constantly. There was no rhyme or reason to it. No, those are good picks, I think, and it really kind of emphasizes the whole favorite thing. Because I mean, if you got a favorite game, nobody's gonna freaking take that away from you, especially how core a part of an identity sometimes these games can become. I'm enough of a nerd where like my favorite game of all time, Final Fantasy VI, not in this generation, kind of helped me with that a bit. So I think it's awesome to hear that Friday the 13th was really that for you, Simbu. That's really cool. So I want to ask Storm now. Stormrosesky, what are your three favorite third generation video games.
I'm confused. Where is Super Mario Brothers 2 in the world of things? The generations.
Okay.
It's
haven't
in this
really-
generation.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is in this generation.
Okay. Because that's the Mario that I absolutely loved, and it was because of Birdo. I just love Birdo. And Duck Hunt also. And just like playing that one. Unfortunately, when we had the Nintendo, when I was growing up, it was my older brother's. And once he got his own room in the attic, and he absconded with the Nintendo, so my playtime with Nintendo is very, very little. But Super Mario Brothers 2, Duck Hunt, and I'm going to take Jamie L's honorable mention, California Games, being a favorite, because I loved California Games on the computer, on the PC, so having it in the Nintendo was fun to play. And there was a lot of button mashing, and there were things that I couldn't pass because I didn't have the special joystick thingamabob.
Yeah.
So, just didn't win those, but I died and just kept playing again because that's what I do. And, they're fun until they're not fun. So, but yeah, Birdo stands out. And it was just fun to throw the freaking eggs at him.
Yeah, it's funny too, because she's ended up becoming like such a core part of the Mario series, up to and including being into the games like the newest Mario Kart as a playable driver, and like Mario RPG as a boss in it, and midway through dungeon. You remember that, right, Storm?
Yes, I do.
God, I'm wondering what she's gonna look like in.
I know
the remake.
Oh, that's coming soon too. Excitement.
Yes.
Yes.
2.5 months.
Woohoo!
I want to try that when it comes out.
Oh, you're gonna love
good.
it.
Yes.
When
I'm done playing it, you can definitely play.
I see what you did there. Okay.
No, Mario 2, I love, because it's and when Storm, of course, is saying Mario 2 for those who like to revel in the pedantry, she of course is referring to the US version, which is a official Nintendo hack of a Japanese game called Doki Doki Panic. It's a more updated, revised version, but with Mario characters. But I mean, come on, for us USites, we know that as Mario 2, and with how much of a change it was from the core gameplay of the original Super Mario Brothers, like it was just a ton of fun, almost kind of like I was going to say Metrovania or open world, but no, that's not what it would be. But like, you were really free to explore and find your way and find multiple exits. So, Astrimedes, how about you? What are your 3 favorite games from the third generation?
So I tried to pick games that were favorites I played a ton of as a kid, and attempted to play at least briefly some of these through whatever means that I had at my disposal, to kind of confirm what sort of still felt fun, basically. Like, so I tried to narrow the list a bit using that criteria. So that in mind, I'll say number 3 was, I'll start from the bottom. Number 3 on my list was Zelda 2, actually. I played Zelda 1 at Legend of Zelda 1 and Zelda 2, and ultimately 1, in comparison, feels slow and just so much older than 2. 2, I was kind of impressed immediately by how kind of like quick into the action, and for a game of its time, the UI is pretty okay. Like, just the variation in like the overworld and the kind of random encounters and lock and key system on the overworld map. Like, there's a ton going on in that game. The whole shield system and combat itself, and leveling mechanic and magic spells. And I was kind of like just struck how I think it was kind of like ahead of its time in terms of like an action RPG design design that actually is like pretty equal in terms of the action and the RPG stuff. And interesting in that it's such a departure from the first game in terms of gameplay. So yeah, Legend of Zelda 2, I would say, is my number 3 in the list here. Number 2 is RC Pro-Am. Pick it up, play it, and it is immediately obvious in how to play. Fun, gets right to the point. Like there's this, I love this design in the game, that the music when you win the race that leads into the trophy room music that leads into the next race music it makes this interesting little like loop in terms of the way the game's designed. Like it is the definition of like, just one more level kind of gameplay before you put it back down. Like my mom played this game a lot actually when I was a kid too. And I remember waking up and finding the game paused and her telling me, don't touch the game. I got a million races in. I'm sure she was up till 5 a.m. playing and then just went to bed or whatever. And it's a great game. It still really holds up. Like controls are really simple, but there's sort of a lot going on there that's designed pretty well. And then number 1 was the original Double Dragon. I just always loved this game. I picked it up and immediately all the kind of like muscle memory kicked in. But like in addition to that, like it just the biggest criticism, even though I kind of made it my number 1, I would say UI wise, it's pretty bad at communicating. Like I remember it being many years after me kind of having played the game, really understanding that you got additional hearts as you got more special moves. It sort of just felt like a mystery, and I had intuited as a kid that I got more moves as it went on, but I never really understood the mechanic, and it's not very well communicated, but the gameplay is fun for such kind of a small number of inputs and what is kind of like a slow movement system and everything. It feels very kind of like dangerous. I thought like the theming was really good too for like a game of the kind of like era. It has this really kind of like dark and dangerous sort of vibe going between the music and sort of the character designs and everything. And I played the mode B or whatever. I'd actually forgotten it was part of Double Dragon 1. There's a B mode, and that is a terrible one-on-one fighting game. I remembered after I started, in my mind, that was maybe something they'd tacked on to number 2 or something. But what's kind of surprising about it is they went through all the trouble of making totally separate character graphics for all these characters at a larger size for this, and gave them sort of like different moves too, like a abbreviated like move set to just like a couple buttons. And it's bad. It would have been much more fun if they literally took the existing that. Yeah, it's like on the main, and the title screen is like in terms of UI design, it's really bad too. Because I remember even as a kid having this problem. On the main title screen, the selector only moves when you press select, not up or down. And I remember this being like sort of like debated. It seemed like what is the best practice on the NES for menus, and some kind of typically earlier games I feel like were more insistent that you use select to change a menu selection, and the arrows weren't for that.
It is possible that being that young that I just never hit select on Double Dragon.
That could be the case.
And that's why funny. I don't remember that mode at all.
It's funny too, because Jamie Owls and I literally ran into that when we were capturing footage for one of my upcoming videos, where she had to have the one player thing, because I gave her the controller while I was using the keyboard as second player. And I'm like, okay, go ahead and select player 2. She's like, okay. And she she's hitting down. It's not moving the darn icon down. It's like, oh, you have to hit select. And I was like, I hit down. I'm like, I know, but you got to hit select.
You're supposed to do things the right way. I'll just mention quickly kind of a runner-up to a game that I didn't really play while I was a kid. I only played it later. but the first Final Fantasy game is, in terms of just like the kind of make your own party layout, I just remember being really enamored with that, and the fact that you could kind of make weird challenges for yourself. Like, I'm going to do 4 red mages or something strange in the design, whatever, of the first game. I always thought was really good. But that game, like, I was immediately struck by sort of like bad UI, and particularly the combat itself. It feels so bad to miss a guy that you killed, like, because you were, even if you planned for it. For those not super familiar with Final Fantasy 1, when you tell your characters to attack, you select like an enemy, as you'd expect, but you select all the enemies, and if you select an enemy that died from a previous attack, well, that character just literally wastes their turn. And I'm sure the thinking there is, oh, that's part of the gameplay or the challenge, but I think that's one of those, it's just a bad design decision. It felt bad then, and it feels even worse now.
So one of the funny things is I'm probably the most critical of my most favorite series and games, and Final Fantasy being my most favorite, I'm also the most critical. And Final Fantasy 1 is a buggy frickin' mess, because not only what you had mentioned, but there are spells that just straight up don't work. Like, they literally, they're supposed to do something, but they don't work.
Oh, wow. I wasn't even familiar with that.
There's stats that just don't work. Like, the intelligence stat is supposed to boost magic power. Yeah, it doesn't work. Just completely flawed. Mm-hmm. The luck stat doesn't work. The 4th player in the 4th slot cannot run. It's statistically impossible. Just cannot run. Like, there's an invisible NPC in the first castle of the game because there was like an overrun or debug overrun issue. And that again, not supposed to be that way. It's a huge buggy mess. Wow. But for what it was, it was a good game for its time. Just, the best thing I can suggest, obviously, is to play an updated version like Final Fantasy Origins or on the PS1, or obviously the Pixel remasters. But yeah, Astrimedes, don't get me started on the issues that I have with the first Final Fantasy, and it's in my top 10 of Final Fantasy games too. So yeah. And RC Pro-Am, which RC Pro-Am game, the first or the second?
The first one was actually the only one I played. I was vaguely aware of second one, okay, but I only played the first one.
That's the wrong answer. The correct answer is RC Pro-Am 2. RC Pro-Am 2 is the better game. So
I don't think I ever played either one of them.
They're both fantastic games. I have the same sort of like memories with RC Pro-Am 2, the obviously the second one versus the first one. But yeah, they're both awesome. And if you like games like that, I recommend Rock and Roll Racing. It was the game that was on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, but it got ported kind of like an ultimate version for the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch, PS5, 4, and Steam on the Blizzard Arcade Collection. It's like a combination of both games, but like revamped graphics and sound, and 4-player split screen. It's fantastic. But don't stream it because it has songs like Bad to the Bone, because of course it has to. Rock and Roll Racing, and the YouTube algorithm gods will strike your content down. So yeah, you don't want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and mention my 3 favorites. My third favorite is going to be Crystallis. And this is a game that played more like an action RPG. So like, think Legend of Zelda Link to the Past, but on the NES. The soundtrack, absolute bangers on it. All the music is fantastic. It has a really cool system for the 4 elemental swords. It's got a really interesting story because the world ends October 6th of 1997. So, the world's been over for about 29 years now. Nobody's counting or anything. Translation of it is a little bit weird. But I think that's because it's kind of a little bit of that English, not as bad as something like Final Fantasy 2 for the US, but it's serviceable, I guess. But just really good kind of amalgamation of like action and RPG. My number 2 is going to be this guy. Final Fantasy 3 for the Famicom, because I did say third generation, and the Famicom is the Japanese counterpart to the NES. And this is probably one of the largest games on the NES cartridge wise. It's like it's like a little over half a megabyte. So for, again, NES time, that's a lot. Graphically, it looks a lot like Final Fantasy IV for the Super Nintendo, but again, of course, the NES. There's so many quality of life updates on this that from like the first two Final Fantasies. So like when you attack an enemy that is already dead, and it being ineffective for Final Fantasy 1, that's gone. It automatically moves to another like enemy, like it should. This is also the game that introduced summons or espers or icons in the Final Fantasy series, Moogles as well. It's probably also one of the best soundtracks that were on the NES, and it's really hard. Like, it's a really difficult Final Fantasy, and it's one of those early JRPGs where you got to do a fair bit of grinding to get your characters like way up there, especially that last dungeon. There's 3 parts to that last dungeon. There's over 15 floors and no save points, no rest points. So when you start the last dungeon, you're in it for the long haul. You pretty much have to go from the beginning all the way to the end, which I recommend the Final Fantasy 3 Pixel Remaster version of it, because you obviously can do quick save, and they've kind of eased up a little bit of that last dungeon Bojazz where it gets really painfully difficult. And then my number one choice is what Astrimedes had said, and that's Zelda 2. And like he was saying, how different it was from the first Zelda game. I loved that. I love the idea that the first Zelda was that whole like overhead top-down view, and now you have the side view where it's like a platformer, but it's also like an action RPG. So like, okay, this is what this enemy looks like on the top view. Okay, now here's what it looks like on a side view. So in a way, you're kind of getting a poor man's 3D view if you combine both in your head of what these enemies and whatnot would look like. And this game is so unique too. No Zelda game is like this for anything that iterated after it. None of them have taken that formula beyond a couple of the god-awful They Who Must Not Be Named CDI games.
The closest thing I've seen is like you see the occasional random like indie game that will do something that feels like Zelda 2 combat. Like, I want to say this game Chasm maybe is what it's called, that feels very Zelda 2 inspired.
Funny you said that too. You say that too, because like even games around this era kind of made it like this. Like Rambo takes a lot of the elements that were in that, like this. Faxanadu, another action RPG, released actually a little before Zelda 2, and then finally the biggest one, Battle of Olympus, where it's essentially like a very slightly modded looking Link, except in like a Greek setting, and it was made by the same devs as Zelda 2. So if you like the whole gameplay of Zelda 2, then you can play. I'd recommend Battle of Olympus, and of course nostalgia abounds for all of these. One of my favorite memories with Zelda 2 is like the fact that my brothers and I grew up playing it. Some of the difficulty, just how tough it was, and to be like having my brothers, say, "Oh, I was able to beat this level finally," or "I was able to beat the game," or my older brother figuring out how to cheese the last boss of Dark Link, where it's supposed to be with one of the hardest battles of the game. And there's Jason laughing because he knows. And all you do is you just go into the corner, crouch, and you just keep swiping your sword, and Dark Link will just run into you and kill himself, literally. So I got to ask, we've mentioned a lot of the games, and I want to kind of ask you guys, what's your like favorite memory or memories with a lot of these. And Simbu, I know you had mentioned how Micro Machines, you played that a lot with Jason the 13th, and then Friday the 13th, how that really helped to kind of be a core part of who you are, and how that impacted your current roles with hobbies and whatnot. Any favorite memories else that you want to share regarding your favorite third generation games?
I mean, a lot of it was, for the most part, I mean, me and Jason the 13th passing controllers on Mega Man was always a great memory. It's like, oh, I can't do this part, and he would pass the controller to him, he would finish it off, and then he would get to a part where he would kind of get a little stuck, so he'd pass the controller off to me, and I would give it a whirl, and just again, it was kind of like a bit of bonding between us. We kind of grew up and kind of got into the same things. Now, one question I do want to ask real quickly: Jurassic Park, was there an NES Jurassic Park, or was that Super NES/Genesis?
I believe so, because it's funny, a Jurassic Park collection actually, pre-orders opened for that on Limited Run Games just this past Friday. So I want to say that there was a Jurassic Park NES game. It looks like the Super Nintendo one. I'm Googling it, and where it's like an overhead thing.
Yeah, because I remember playing. I can't remember if I played it on NES or SNES, but it was a top down view. You played as like Alan. You basically played as Alan Grant running around through Jurassic Park. So I mean, again, of course, the whole dinosaur thing that was me and Jason the 13th, big draw there. But again, I do think that we didn't play the Jurassic Park game until SNES.
Yep. SNES and Game Boy were the first ones I remember for Jurassic Park.
Of course, I remember playing it on the Game Boy too.
Yep.
Storm, how about you? What are your some of your favorite memories with Mario 2, Duck Hunt, and California games?
The Duck Hunt, definitely trying to shoot the dog, because his little stupid laugh because you missed was aggravating as all get out. Mario with Birdo and jumping over and trying to land on the egg, and I'm going to segue away from this a little bit, because some of my more of my memories come from playing the Atari 7800, and Pole Position was my favorite racing game at the time. So that I have a lot more memories with, because I spent a lot more time with Atari. There was also Pac-Man on it. So funny enough, I did not have the Tetris game. Anyway, so but I guess that's a bit all over the place. But California games, I more remember on the PC, but there was some surfing thing that you had to do that was a lot of fun. And of course, none of those games had any ability to ride horses or anything, and those were my favorite. Some of my newer favorite games, like, have the ability to ride horses and other animals, because I like to do that. So
pet the dog and ride the horse, important game features.
Exactly. They really are. They really are.
Astrimedes, how about you? I'm kind of curious what your some of your favorite memories with Zelda 2 are.
I couldn't really come up with any memories specific to Zelda 2. I mean, well, I guess so. So thinking about Zelda 2 specifically, I mean, I sort of it was one of those games that I really had to kind of work to get good at. I do remember when I beat that horsehead first boss for the first time. I felt very accomplished, because I had set out to get good enough to beat it very intentionally so I could beat it and then beat it. So it was sort of one of those like skill challenge games. And similarly, I do very specifically remember with Double Dragon, the first time I beat the two Abobos out and then entered the cave, and then like the music changes and the stalactites are falling on you to jump across some kind of mine carts or something like that. But I very specifically remember that. And then though Duck Hunt was not in my list of games, I do very much remember me and my brother, more me shooting him with the gun just to make each other angry. And my brother was young enough to where he understood he should be offended at that. And then I kind of alluded to before, specifically Mega Man 2. I remember me, my brother, and my aunts, which weren't too far apart in age from us, so basically more like our cousins, were playing the game, and we were at the point where we were trying to get past that like dragon mini boss every time we got to it, like multiple, probably at least half a dozen times. We would get there, everyone in the room would scream. As soon as the dragon appeared, the person playing would fall in the pit as a result of everyone screaming. And this basically went on that way, and I don't think we beat it that day.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny. Yeah, I got God, that dragon every single time, like, because the blocks are moving, and you have to have Mega Man constantly moving and jumping and everything. And for whatever reason, the game makes. I think the game made those blocks when Mega Man is moving the same ice consistency as the Flashman blocks that appear in that stage up until you finally stop and you meet it. But I think it was just something to sort of make it feel like it's a fast moving thing. So, hey, here's some slippery blocks for you. Or at least that's what I kept remembering, is slipping off. It's like,
I remember it being slippery too. Yeah. In my head, it's like they were ice blocks, but
yes.
Yeah, I do remember them being slippery.
Jamie Owls, you kind of have the same thing with Duck Hunt. You had your brother try and shoot you with a gun?
No, pretty much for me, the memories were just, having fun with my two older siblings. We used to have the TV set up in the basement, and we would just all be surrounded by the TV, taking turns playing Duck Hunt. I remember mostly watching my brother play Mario Brothers. And it's funny, my sister was never really much of a gamer, only she would play the California games with us. It's funny, out of the three of us, I'm the only one that really stuck with continuing playing video games as we've gotten older. My brother, occasionally, I believe he still has the original Nintendo 64. And then one Christmas, we bought him the mini NES. So I know he plays a little bit, like handful of times. But I just think for me, just, at that time when you're kids and everything, it just felt more relaxing, where you didn't have anything else to worry about except like playing games. And that's how I got introduced with playing more Mario games when I was a kid. And yeah, that's pretty much all the memories I have with those three games.
Oh, it makes sense. There's nothing more relaxing than having your guy be eaten by a shark,
Mm.
because at least it's not you. It's
No.
your player avatar that is.
Yeah.
Jason, how about you? Your favorite memory, of course, is our Mega Man X competition to see who could go as far as we could playing
Without
Mega Man
dying?
without dying. Is that no?
As for memories, out of those particular games, just Mega Man 2 being one of the first games to actually beat on my own without like any help or anything like that was probably like one of my first accomplishments for video games. For G.I. Joe, getting to the end of that game and then getting General Hawk was insane because he had the jetpack and everything, and he was like, oh my god, the end level was so much fun with that. But just having fun. Again, I have two brothers and a couple of cousins, including Simbu over here, that just playing. And like he said, you get stuck, you get frustrated, you hand it off to somebody else, let them play it, get you unstuck, and then you get to go back to it and stuff like that. And then you brought up a memory that has nothing to do with this: cheesing games. My mom never played video games. The only game she played was Tetris. It was the only game she played. But my dad played video games with us all the time. My dad, for the games that were harder to beat, found a way to hook it up, and we recorded on VHS. Yes, I'm showing my age again. We recorded our gameplay to games on the VHS to watch back some of the bosses and stuff like that to see what would happen, and then go back and play it again. And
like a boxer.
Yes.
Preparing for their opponent.
Yes. We got that bad with some of the games.
Yeah, but that's not cheating, and like
I was expecting something much different.
Well,
yeah,
I think of it as like a cheesy thing to do, to where instead of just playing the game, we were like, you play it, you'd watch a boss battle, and then it's like, okay, well, I failed here, and then you see what it's doing.
It's a studious thing to do.
Yeah, like anybody who's played the Dark Souls series of games, when they can't beat a boss, they just pull it up on YouTube and feel, all right, how the frick do I beat this guy? So, see, your dad was ahead of his time. That's what you take away from that.
That is true. That is true.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Otherwise, just having fun with the games. And like I said, the most replayed games are not necessarily the top games. So
yeah, because I think we probably have my top three games, what I think are the three best games on the system. Like, I think probably the best game on for like the third generation is Mario 3, but it's not one of my favorite games. I've got a ton of memories with it. There's just something with the funkiness with my 3, like how unique Zelda 2 is, or how surprisingly good a Crystallis was, or Final Fantasy 3. I wasn't even a kid when I played that I was a teenager. I was like 15 or 6. Yeah, I was like 15 when I played Final Fantasy 3 for the first time. But still, I wasn't like how old I was with the original NES, and it's just kind of an interesting thought with that. So yeah, that's pretty much our discussion with the third generation. It was really an amazing generation insofar it was Nintendo really paving the way for future generations, and what we're going to touch upon future generations most likely in a later video and podcast.
So
that being
real quick.
Oh yes, Jason.
Can I say sorry to the Sega, because being that young at that time, I did not know Sega was a thing until Sega Genesis.
Yeah, and that's totally normal.
Same.
It was a US centric experience for most people. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because like
my first actual owned system was the Sega Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Like we I don't think the SG-1000 came out in the States, and Sega Master System didn't really blow up where we all were located, and really wasn't selling near as much as the original NES.
Yep.
So
sorry to Sega's third gen there. So
and kind of going into the fourth gen a little bit, which we'll touch upon on a later video, like we're going to have a lot more of a divided conversation, because of the fact that it's going to be we're all going to be talking about TurboGrafx 16. Yes, that's right.
I have some extensive TurboGrafx 16 experience, so good to remind me that console also existed as part of that generation.
Absolutely. So we're going to be talking exclusively about our love for the TurboGrafx 16.
Easily an episode's worth of content.
No, so that obviously is part of the fourth generation, but like this shows how amazing that generation was, and how the NES helped to in a way influence and branch out some amazing systems, because the TurboGrafx 16 or PC Engine, if you want to get Japanese about it, it really had a lot of amazing games, and just I've
Turn
totally
in
slept on
Japanese.
them.
Turn in Japanese. I really think so. Sorry,
I do.
earworm.
And you're welcome for that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. There was one racing game that was on the Nintendo system. Oh, I thought about, because I absolutely love the course in Super Mario, because you jump all the time.
Is that Excitebike?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
That was
Thanks
a
to
fun
the-
game.
thanks to that game for inspiring one of my favorite courses ever on Mario Kart, the Excitebike. I just love jumping the hills and doing little twirly thingies in the air. So there
It was a great game. Had user-generated content, pretty rare at the time.
Yeah, especially when
I
they
didn't know that.
allowed you to edit tracks.
Yep, that's what I
The
mean.
best
yeah.
part of Excitebike was the Jamie Owls effect of how interesting could we make him crash?
And I see your Excitebike and I raise you versus Excitebike, because it essentially is Excitebike, but you can do 2-player simultaneous gameplay, and the save and load feature actually works and doesn't brick your NES.
Ooh. And out of all this talk, who misses blowing into cartridges to get them to work?
I think we had a conversation about that before.
Yeah, and having the special cleaner pads that you used to get at the store to,
all the physical cartridge paraphernalia.
Hey,
Yes,
Mario 3.
yes.
Not the real cartridge.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, dust covers were such a thing of their time.
They were.
They were.
Oh gosh, but I just want to give a special shout out again to the wonderful cast and crew here. We're really having an awesome amount of conversation about this topic and just in general. And you can always catch our podcasts again on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and of course here on YouTube. And just want to make sure to remind you guys who are listening, to make sure you like and subscribe and catch us on the next one. But again, I just want to thank my crew, Stormrosesky. You, of course, again, find her at Twitch and YouTube channels of Stormrosesky. Storm, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And we'll hopefully have new content on the YouTube pretty soon. It's just been slow going with work and all of that, real life stuff. But hopefully soon.
Yes, life always tends to get in the way. How dare it?
I know. God.
Also, Jamie Owls 87, my partner in crime. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, pleasure as always. I always have fun. Thank you.
And Astrimedes, developer and co-owner of Second Place Games. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, and I'll just mention that I am looking to hopefully re-release a free version of my game Horde Lord that had fallen out of native support in the Android store initially without my knowledge, and I'm in the process of fixing up to just release for free this time after my failed experiment of pricing it at $1 was just too much for consumers to bear.
Definitely keep us posted when that releases, and we'll make sure to let the viewers and listeners know where and when to find that. Jason the 13th, he of course has his YouTube channel of Jason the 13th, not just a clever title. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Not a problem. Happy to be here as always.
And last but not least, Simbu Darkfang, one of the main actors for Basement of the Dead. Simbu, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, always a fun time.
And again, gentle reminder, Basement of the Dead, located in Aurora, Illinois. That's in Chicagoland. Opens up the grand opening night on September 22nd. So definitely want to check that out if you enjoy a good scare. And thanks again to you, the viewers and listeners, for joining, and I hope you have a great day.